Welcome, folks, to the Agree to Disagree podcast with Phil and Ethan. This is the premiere episode, going to be a weekly podcast that we do now through Election Day, and our focus will be on everything hot in Maine politics.
Did you just call me hot?
Hey, well, you know, buddy, you're the most handsome Republican I know.
Do you actually know any other Republicans?
Good point.
In all seriousness, our new podcast will come out every Thursday right here at newscentermaine.com. Each week, we will give you an inside look at what is happening in Maine politics, and what a year to be getting started.
Indeed. We have the U.S. Senate race where Susan Collins is in the fight of her life, and we have Republicans who are desperate to try to keep Jared Golden from becoming a two-term congressman up in the second CD.
Not to mention, Trump and Biden are scrapping for all four Maine electoral votes, and both parties, as always, are vying for control of the State House.
Yeah, that's a race that you and I have experienced many times.
Indeed. Each week, we will open up with your mentor, Nancy Pelosi, bringing us to order.
As Speaker of the House, I solemnly and sadly open the debate.
Then we will debate 3 to 4 topics for 3 minutes each, or until Ethan cries for mercy.
Yeah, at which point Schoolsy will be Phil will be woken up by our producer Schoolsy with this sound.
After that, we'll usually jump into some kind of lightning round. Sometimes we'll play Love It or Hate It, or Wake Me Up When It's Over, as we will this week.
Other weeks, we might play Smart or Not Smart, or we may come up with winners and losers of the week, or we may throw in some predictions, whatever feels right that week.
And finally, because this is Maine's bicentennial year, that's 200 years, Ethan, we plan to end each show with a trivia question related to Maine political history.
Yeah, you mean like, I got a good one. How about, did Senator Harriman serve in both the administrations of Governor Percival Baxter and James Finney Baxter, or was it one and then the other? No.
More like true or false. Mayor Strimling sponsored a bill once to annex the New Hampshire toll booth so he could get more revenue for government programs.
True, and it was a damn good idea, if I may say so myself.
Okay, time to get starting with the debates. By the way, do we need to introduce ourselves?
You know what? That's probably a good idea. Let's do that real quick. For those who don't know, that guy over there on my left, maybe your right, but definitely more conservative than me. He is my buddy Phil Harriman. He's been in elected office for 13 years. First as a town councilor for the thriving metropolis of downtown Yarmouth, and then as a state senator. He founded a financial services firm called LaBelle and Harriman. He always wears a pocket square, and I think he's got about 27 grandchildren, the last I checked.
Well, actually, it's 5, but it sometimes feels like 27. And let me introduce my friend Ethan. He ran a social services agency for 10 years called Learning Works before serving 10 years in elected office, first as a state senator and most recently as the mayor of Maine's largest city. Regretfully, he's also a Mets fan.
Oh, yeah. Let me show you this. Put that right here, buddy. I don't know if we're going to get a baseball season this year, but that's probably, if we don't have it, it's better for me as a Mets fan. Yes. So, all right. Shall we start the first debate?
As Speaker of the House, I solemnly and sadly open the debate.
All right. So our first conversation is going to be who will win the Republican primary for Congress in the second CD. This Tuesday, as we know, there will be a Republican primary for the second CD between Eric Brakey, Adrian Bennett, and Dale Crafts. Eric was the youngest state senator in the country. Adrian was Governor LePage's press secretary, and Dale is a successful businessman. So, Phil, on Tuesday, who will win the Republican primary for Congress in the second CD and why?
My prediction is that Dale Crafts is going to win that election. I say that because he has a pretty broad experience with working as a legislator. He's been a successful small businessman. His personal story of becoming a paraplegic and using a wheelchair, I think, resonates across the entire voter spectrum. I also think that Eric Brakey, while he does have a pretty impressive legislative legacy, that was many years ago now, and I'm curious to see how deep and wide his grassroots network is from his unsuccessful race against U.S. Senator Angus King. And finally, Adrienne Bennett, who was Governor LePage's press secretary, has really impressed me with the ability that she has demonstrated to handle any topic gracefully and with commitment. And also, she has managed through primarily social media to make a lot of contacts around the 2nd Congressional District. But in the end, I predict it's going to be Dale Crafts.
You know, I actually think it's going to be Adrienne Bennett. I mean, yours is a pretty bold pick. Dale Crafts kind of, not somebody who was very well known, really just somebody who was up in the legislature, certainly a businessman, overcame something remarkable, the accident back when he was in his 20s, put him in that wheelchair. But I think Adrienne Bennett kind of has this, she's got the name recognition. She has a real connection to Governor LePage. By the way, what's going on with the loyalty from Governor LePage? I mean, this woman served him for 8 years, just couldn't have been a stronger ally. And for him to walk away from her, that must have stung, I would imagine. Eric Brakey's the interesting story here. He's kind of the one that went in as the front runner, but he's really faded back, I feel like. Although I would say that he might come in first on the first ballot. But I think once you start counting in the ranked choice voting, Adrienne is going to be the one to bring it through. She's got kind of the conservative credentials that I think Republicans like. And look, honestly, Republicans in some ways have been better than Democrats at nominating women for congressional seats. You've certainly had more than we have.
Well, you neutralized yourself. First, you took us to ranked choice voting, which Republicans just detest. And then you wrapped it up with the compliment to Adrienne Bennett. So I'll give you a neutral on that. At the end of the day, I think it's very telling that Governor LePage still has, particularly amongst the party faithful who actually go and vote in primary elections, he has put his support behind Dale Crafts. I think that matters. And just Thursday mid-afternoon, Ann LePage has come out and endorsed Dale Crafts. I think those two endorsements matter in the Republican faithful party infrastructure, and I think that's going to help carry Dale Crafts to victory.
The thing that I'm hoping for more than anything, no matter who wins it, I just want whoever comes in second on the first ballot to ultimately come in first so that Republicans can just eat each other to death for a while, fighting over who actually won, because I know how much you guys hate ranked choice voting, and then to have it just have this whatever you call it, your party just tearing each other apart over who actually won it. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Okay, let's move on. Topic number 2. This Tuesday, there will be a Democratic primary for the opportunity to take on Susan Collins for the U.S. Senate. Former Speaker of the House, Sarah Gideon, is the presumptive favorite, but she's being challenged by the upstart campaign of progressive activist Betsy Sweet. And while a third candidate, while little known, Bree Kidman, is still on the ballot, she's not campaigning. So, Ethan, on Tuesday, will Sarah Gideon hold on to win the seat to challenge Susan Collins, or will Betsy Sweet pull an upset surprise?
You're not even putting Bree Kidman in there as a possible upset surprise?
No.
Well, sadly, I don't. I should disclose Betsy Sweet's a very good friend of mine, like a sister to me. I've given to her campaign, but I don't think she's going to be able to win this one. I think Sarah Gideon will win it pretty strongly. She's really had the backing of a lot of the establishment. She's raised an unbelievable amount of money. She is just in a position here that we've certainly never seen in a primary. She's raising more money than at this point already than I think any ultimate nominee has raised, even I think more than any incumbent has raised. So she's put herself in a very strong position, been on TV for 8 months now, 9 months. I think she's going to win pretty strongly on election day. But look, Betsy has run a really good campaign. She's been out there pushing issues that I think matter tremendously to Maine voters, especially Democrats, Medicare for all, Green New Deal. She just really hasn't had the money behind her to be able to get that message out deeply enough in order to pull an upset on election day.
Well, like you, I too have a lot of respect for Betsy Sweet. When I was in the state Senate, she was working as a lobbyist for various causes that you mentioned, and she's always been a consummate professional, well-spoken, and even though our party affiliations are very different. She was an easy person to like, and I do think that will connect with voters. But this isn't going to be even close, Ethan. The national money and the Senate leadership in Washington has already adopted or anointed, if you will, Sarah Gideon, and they've put the resources behind it. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be an uphill climb that will be successful for Betsy Sweet.
Yeah, I do think you're right about that. Look, I think it's going to be, I don't think it'll be a total bloodshed out there. I think it'll be 60, 35, 5, something like that, which of course is a pretty big victory. Sarah Gideon has been polling more than 50 points ahead. So I don't think she's going to get 50 points ahead, maybe more like 20 to 25, but she'll come out of this with a pretty strong victory in her hands. And hopefully after that, the party will unite, which I think they will, as we begin the process of taking on Susan Collins and seeing if she can be unseated for the first time in over 20 years.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how that race unfolds. Sarah Gideon is positioning herself to be, the local candidate who was representing Main Street and trying to portray Susan Collins as having, been bought by the special interest groups. But the fact is that these very same special interest groups in Washington are pouring millions of dollars into this, because this is really, unfortunately, not a Maine election. This is a national election. Maine is a place where you can come and try to influence just 1.3 million people. The media market is relatively inexpensive compared to other places across the country. It's going to be very interesting to see how Sarah Gideon maintains that persona that she's put out there thus far.
Yep, I think you're right on that. And we'll get into that probably at our next podcast. All right, our third last topic today, another much less noticed election will be happening in Portland this Tuesday. It's an election, however, that could have a profound effect on our largest city's future. It's a referendum on whether or not to reopen the city charter. This would give Portland a chance to revisit the elected mayor and fix any problems that have existed in its first 10 years. Phil, should the city reopen its charter? And if so, do you think that they will do it?
Yes, they should, and I predict that they will overturn the current city charter. You mentioned 10 years ago, it seems like a blinding glimpse of the obvious today, Ethan, that special commission that was formed to create the charter that actually passed left this ambiguity between who actually sets policy, strategy, budget, and executes them. Is it the city manager or the mayor? And I think that's where the opportunity is for Portland to make it clear who actually is in charge of making the decisions that run the city.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not sure if this will pass. Certainly, I've got a lot of personal experience with this one, and the way the charter was written 10 years ago, it's just not meeting the expectations of the people of the city. We went through in our first three elections, trying to figure out how to make this thing work. The balance is off. You really, just like you said, you need to have one person in charge, and everybody expects that person to be the mayor, and to not have that system. And, the system was put in place over 100 years ago. Honestly, it was endorsed by the KKK back then because they were trying to block democracy from being handed over to immigrants, Irish Catholics at that time, which the KKK was fighting so hard against, and created this kind of much more exclusive government. So I think, the Charter Commission, they tried, but they made a bit of a mess of it. It's a classic example of when you've got people on a Charter Commission who don't want to have any elected mayor, and people who do, cutting the baby in half instead of simply putting in place the elected mayor that people really wanted to have. So it's unfortunate, but you think it's going to pass?
I do. I think there's enough frustration with how the city has had to wrestle with the executive authority of the city. As you probably can relate to, it created frustration between the mayor and the city manager. It created even more frustration amongst city councilors. This is an important issue for the city to straighten out and decide once and for all who's in charge.
Yeah, I'm less optimistic than you. I think it became an issue that people became aware of around the Black Lives Matter movement. They endorsed it, as did a bunch of progressive groups in town. But some of that, I think, came a little bit late. So I'm not so sure. If I had to put, if I had to put a nickel down on it, I'd say it'd probably lose by 5 or 10 points. But I hope you're right, because certainly the city of Portland deserves to have a much clearer charter, so our leadership is clear going forward.
You would. Okay, Strim, let's play a round of love it, hate it, or wake me up when it's over. We'll each throw out a few hot topics, and the other person will respond with love it, hate it, or wake me up and it's over.
All right, let's do it.
Here's the first one. You ready?
Yeah.
Janet Mills now allowing Mets fans from New York into Maine, but not Red Sox fans from Massachusetts. Strim, love it, hate it, or wake me up when it's over.
Love it, both, because who wants more folks from Massachusetts up here? We already got too many, right? And I also love it because actually I got a little personal connection. My father is coming up. He's from New York. So I'm very glad that Janet's allowing him to come up, but he's getting a test. He's going to make sure he's safe. So I think that Janet did the right thing here. Take your time, get it right. Wait a minute, Phil, you got to give me a love or hate it on that one.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was my opportunity. Well, I'm going to take the opportunity to fill up my point of view, which is I hate it. I think it has put such a crippling effect on Maine's economy, particularly the tourist industry at this time of the year when we have so many opportunities to bring in sales tax revenue and gasoline tax revenue from people who are going to go home and not need our services. And if you've been following the protocols as outlined by the Center for Disease Control across the country, social distancing, washing, and all the rest of it, why does it matter where you physically live now? If you want to come here and abide by the rules, we should have you here.
All right, Phil, next one. Love it, hate it, or wake me when it's over. Sarah Gideon outraised Susan Collins $8 million to $3 million in the last quarter.
I hate it. I think this is just a precursor of all of the money that's being coagulated around the country through the Washington, D.C. establishment, where it's about their party first, their elections second, and maybe our country third. Let's remember, this is a long way to go before November. Susan Collins is a very skilled politician, a skilled legislator, and I think that when you put together all of the money that has been raised from the start of the campaign to today, that disparity that you mentioned is not that different, and Susan Collins is going to be suited up and ready for victory.
Just real quick on that one, I'm like, wake me up when it's over. You know what? I mean, there's so much money coming in. Only the insiders in the campaigns are looking at both of these candidates will have all the money they need, super PACs, everything coming in. Look, I abhor the big money in politics as much as the next one, but you know what? Wake me up when it's over. Let's talk issues.
Okay, Strim, Portland has banned the school resource officers from their high schools. Mr. Mayor, love it, hate it, or wake me up when it's over.
This one I love. This is a good move, an important step. Take those resources, get them into the classroom, try to make sure that we got social workers in the schools. We didn't need the police officers in there. This is a vestige of the past, but I'm glad that this happened. So this one, I love it.
I hate it. I tell you, this was an idea born out of the education community, whether it was the superintendent or the school board. They invited the school resource officer in, and now they're using the men and women in blue as part of the problem in America's schools. I think this is unfair to the law enforcement community, and I think the schools are going to wish they had made the decision to keep them.
All right, Phil, Maine State Police are gathering publicly available data on Mainers. Phil, do you love it? Do you hate it? Or wake me when it's over?
I really hate this one. I think the thought of the state police in a position where in some, undisclosed location, they're gathering information on people and using algorithms to determine who to focus on or what areas of the state to pay attention to over others. I think this is an infringement on our right to privacy, and it's not the type of label that should be put on the state police.
Yeah, I'm with you on this one. I don't like it at all. I'm glad the legislature in a bipartisan way is really looking hard at this. Democrats being willing to call a Democratic administration to the table, Republicans equally concerned about privacy rights. I'm glad to see folks coming together on this one, so I hate it too.
Hey, last one. You ready? Mayor Trump says her Uncle Trump paid someone to take his SATs. You love it, hate it, or wake me up when it's over.
Well, look, I wish I could have paid somebody to take my SATs. Literally, I think, Phil, my combined score on the SATs was 940. I think I got like a 510 on one and like a 420 on the other or something. It was just pathetic. I was not the SAT test taking kind of student, but other than that, wake me up when it's over.
Wow, I thought this was about agree to disagree. This is another one we agree on. Wake me up when it's over. Who cares what his test scores were, 50 years ago now? It's a big yawn for me.
All right, so that's our debate on topics. As mentioned earlier, this is Maine's bicentennial, and as you educated me, that is 200 years. 200 years ago, we started this crazy experiment called Life is Good Here, and in honor of our state's birthday, we are going to ask a Maine political trivia question each week, and then we will give the answer next week. So, you ready for the question?
I am. What is it?
In the past 8 decades, there have been only 6 years in which we have had no female member of Congress. Can you name the women who have served? And can you name the 6 years that it was all men?
Oh. And as a hint, can I mention the party that a majority of those women belong to?
Yes, you can. Sad to say, it has been the grand old party in Maine that broke the glass ceiling before and more often than my beloved Democrats. But the answer to who those folks are and what those 6 years were will come next week.
Okay, my brother from another mother, I think it's time to wrap up week 1. Tell us, Donald, how'd we do?
You're fake news.
Don't be rude.
See you next week, folks, on newscentermaine.com.
You too, Phil. Have a great one.
The clock has run out. The buzzer is sounding.
See you, Phil.
All right, all the best.